Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Penalty. I'm your host, Trevor Cherney. Thank you so much for joining once again on the show. So obviously, we didn't have a podcast recorded yesterday, and that was sort of my fault. We had some technical problems that I didn't foresee, and unfortunately, we were not able to get an episode out yesterday, which I do apologize for. I typically like to get out an episode every Monday and Friday, so that's my fault. That's completely my fault. I take full responsibility and blame for that. But we're here, and you know what? No matter if we're, as the saying goes, it's better to be late than never. So we still have a packed show. We still have an exciting show for you guys. Obviously we'll get into Lions and what happened Sunday. And some of the changes they made offensively. So we'll get into that. And then also, too, for the first time in this program, we're going to talk about a sports team that we haven't gone to at all this show, at all. So not once in the show's history have we gone to this team before. We'll get to that team later on. So what I gathered from the game on Sunday is, well, first of all, when I was watching the game and the Lions' first offensive drive, I knew right away something was kind of off. Just not in the drive itself and not how the Lions played, but Danny Campbell's sidelines. You see him with the glasses. You see him with the Applebee's menu. He's got basically the size of an Applebee's menu. And I thought for a second there, he could be calling plays there. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, maybe. And then later after the game, Danny Campbell did confirm himself that yes, it was him who was calling the plays and not his offensive coordinator John Moran. So to me, that basically says that John Moran is basically done as the OC. He was hired in to call plays. He was hired into for this to be his offense. And clearly Danny Campbell, especially the past 3 weeks, right? All the way back to the Kansas City. And Danny Campbell has been seeing the same problems over and over again. The inability to get things going, the inability to get a rhythm going, the inability to get a run game going, not moving the ball, terrible on third downs. It hasn't looked quite the same from last year. And it's become very predictable. And it's just what happens, So Dan Campbell was like, okay, well, I got to fix this now or else, because the Lions have a pretty tough schedule coming up. I mean, obviously next week they're facing the Eagles, who just got a big win over the Packers. Then they face, the Giants. Okay, well, I know the Giants. They just fired their head coach too. So, but then they face the Packers. That's a huge game. That could be the division right there. Like a big picture, getting that win from the Packers and then splitting the series with the Packers this season would be huge for the Lions, especially if they're trying to still win the NFC North. So this was a change that Danny Campbell needed to make because clearly the offense hasn't been gelling the same as it has been before, right? And of course, there's a lot of layers and layers to it, right? Obviously, the offensive line, it's not as good as it was last year, right? And it still is pretty good, but again, it's losing Frank Ragnow is huge for that offensive line, and losing somebody like Zeiler as well, who was a huge part of that offensive line as well. Losing those two guys in the same offseason has really hurt this team. Now, thankfully, they still have two really good tackles. Tate Radledge has been playing a little better. He still isn't perfect, but he's getting there. Unfortunately, Christian Mahogany's out for the year. at least until late, until late this season. Um, and then obviously Graham Glass now. I mean, probably the weakest link of that offensive line, but again, it was always going to be hard to go from Ragnow to somebody else because Ragnow was an all-pro center. In my eyes, he was probably when he was on the field healthy, he was the best center in the league. I mean, dude was a bulldozer. He was. I mean, there's a reason why his nickname was Frank the Tank. I mean, he was a beast, and even though he sorely is missed in this offensive line, the lines they have to adjust. Look, Ragnow isn't coming back out of retirement. Even though I know people have been wanting him to come back, unfortunately, that's not reality. That's not realistic. He's done. So, look, the 5 offensive linemen out there. That's a group that we have to roll with all year long. So, even though it's been somewhat of an issue, it's still is something that we can improve on, right? But as long as the scheming is there, and as long as the play calling is there, then it will eventually work itself out. At least that's what you hope. So obviously, Dan Campbell's now calling the shots on offense, and look, he's putting himself in the jackpot by making this move. So, and hey, you know what? I respect it. I really do. Because, he could just sort of have a wait and see approach. We'll wait and see after, the Eagles and Packers game. But clearly Dan Campbell saw something he didn't like, either in practice or in game or whatnot. And he was like, look, let me take over. Okay. I got this. So, I mean, and it worked. I mean, they scored 44 points. They looked really good on offense. But also they were facing a bottom 3 defense in basically every statistical category, known to man. So I mean, again, Washington, they're not a good team. They lost their quarterback for the year. Their defense blows. I mean, they're just not a very good team. So now the Lions should have won, and thankfully they did. So at least they got that. So, and now moving on to the Packers game, I'm sorry, the Eagles game this Sunday. Dan Campbell said he's going to continue play calling for that game. I would imagine this could be through the entire season. I can't see him giving back John Moore and play calling duties. At least not in this current moment, right? Especially, no, look. Let's say Dan Campbell fails at it and he doesn't do well with play calling. Well, then, yeah, he might go back to John Moore. But I don't envision that happening at least anytime soon, right? Dan Campbell, look, if there's anybody in the league who knows his team like it's the back of his right hand, okay? Who knows the identity of his team, who knows, what works and what doesn't for his team, it's Dan Campbell. Like, there's not a singular better there's only a handful of coaches in this league who have such a great pulse on their team like Dan Campbell does. Like, it's honestly, it is incredible. It's just how much, I mean, he knows his team well, and he knows what works and what doesn't work. So that gives me hope. Look, if it worked, it works, Now, look, obviously, I'm not going to go into the whole, what about John Moore now? Look, John Moore's role right now is to basically help out Dan Campbell, right? But effectively, he's no longer your offensive coordinator. I mean, he's there obviously to help in design plays and still give ideas and what to call, but effectively, Dan Campbell's now your offensive coordinator. He's now because now he's the one calling the shots, not your OC. So, I mean, this is now Danny Campbell's offense. It's no longer John Morant's. It's Dan Campbell's. So, look, whatever happens here and now, it's on him. Okay? And I want to see what he does in a close game when, if the Lions have the ball and if they can close it out, Because what you can't do is you can't be, Matt LaFleur and calling these nonsensical plays, trying to hit Christian Watson deep on a post when there's only, only 25 seconds left in the game. So there's enough time to make a couple chuck plays happen, a couple of 10-yard plays here and there, and at least get down and spike the ball a couple of times to at least put yourself in field goal range. So, I don't know. I mean, Dan Campbell, again, he's not a lifelong play caller, right? He's not a Sean McVay. He's not a Andy Reid. He's not those type of play callers where it just comes natural to those guys, and they know what to call. But I do have confidence that he knows his team, right? He knows his offense. He knows Jared Goff. He knows Amon-Ra St. Brown. He knows James Williams. He knows Laporta. He's going to use his weapons. He's going to try and get everybody involved because that's how the Lions offense succeeds. Like we talked on Friday, the Lions offense is at its very best when everybody's involved. I can go down the list of weapons, but it's too long. I mean, they have so many weapons to choose from. It's not even funny. So, and yeah, I mean, look, we'll get more to Friday about the Eagles game and whatnot. That's a big game though, and that's a game where if the Lions still want to be top dogs in the NFC, and especially if they still want to win their division, that's a game that's a game you have to win, right? Now it's tough. It's gonna be a tough game. It's on the road, Sunday night. We'll see. It's gonna be tough, but it's certainly gonna be a good game to watch. So, but like I said, we'll get more to that game on Friday. So we'll talk more about Campbell and now his offense, and again, if there's anybody who has a great pulse on their team, it's Dan Campbell. So it's probably the right move. So I mean, but I guess we'll find out and see. Like I said, I'm just glad that at least Dan Campbell is willing to put himself in this situation, because ultimately this shows, okay, I'm willing to die on this hill. I'm willing to put myself in the jackpot if ultimately it helps the team down the line. Those are real big boy coaching decisions, truly. So yeah, that was the Commanders and Lions. Not a whole lot to talk about the Commanders. The Commanders are effectively a dead corpse. So, I mean, they're not really worth talking about. I mean, their season is going to go nowhere. So, but yeah. And now I would like to introduce on the program for the first time. We're going to be talking about the Detroit Pistons. So, yes, finally. I know some of you are probably Pistons fans out there. Finally, yes. And look, the reason why we're talking about them is they're playing really good basketball. Actually, they're playing great basketball. They're 9-2 for the first time since 2005. Think about that. 2005. Just to show you guys my age, okay? Back in 2005, I was 3 years old. So, yeah, that's just to tell you guys how old I am. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that the Pistons are in this situation. Now, look, let me just clarify. Let me just say before I do anything else. I am not a Pistons fan. Um, Now, yeah, sure. When I was younger, I rooted for them, but I became more of a Cavs fan. Um, and that's just obviously with LeBron being with like the Cavs and whatnot, and me originally being born from Ohio. Unlike with the Lions and Tigers and Red Wings, I've been driven more to be a Cavs fan than a Pistons fan. No, obviously, look, I'll still root for the Pistons, and I'll still, you know, hopefully want them to win because it is good for the show as well if they win. Um, and look, again, I'm going to talk about them if they're playing really good basketball, and they are. Um, but I really want to give one player a huge spotlight. Um, it's Cade. Cade Cunningham is playing at a MVP level this year. He has taken that next step to be a superstar. Last night, I saw something. So he had about 45 points last night. He near 45 points. 10 rebounds, 10 assists. I forget something else. But it's the first time that a player has done that in a game since check notes, Michael Jordan. Now I'm not saying Cade Cunningham is Michael Jordan, okay? I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna go that far, okay? But whenever you're in the same conversation as Michael Jordan, which again, no matter if you're Jordan's the GOAT or LeBron's the GOAT, no matter what side you're on, like Michael Jordan's one of the great players of all time. Even being in the same conversation with them, that it speaks to the impressiveness of him as a player and the way he's been playing. The way he has truly stepped up this year. We saw a little bit last year. We saw flashes of greatness from Cade. But now you're really starting to see him put it all together as a player, And look, if you want to say Cade is an MVP frontrunner, I mean, clearly it's still early in the season, but I can't argue that. And I don't think anybody else could either. I mean, how could you? He is an absolutely MVP candidate. And you know what? Hey, he should be probably the front runner for MVP. He should be. Now, is that going to last? I don't know. And honestly, a lot of it especially matters in what you do in February and March, and of course in April, and going into May as well. So that's really going to those later months as we get closer and closer to the end of the season will dictate, who the MVP is, obviously, who we think it's going to be. He just has to keep this going. He has to be more consistent. He has the ability to do so. He has a team around him to play consistent. Since there are actually pieces around him now and not just got a bunch of nobodies off the street, thankfully. They actually have NBA players who actually contribute and help with the Pistons. And again, massive shout out to Trajan Lang, who has truly turned over the entire front office and has made it even better. Constructed a really well-rounded roster. Huge credit to JB Bickerstaff as well, who's done a phenomenal job with coaching. And as much as I don't like this man, and I still don't, and I hate to give him any credit because, man, oh man, I never thought I would give him any credit whatsoever. Tom Gores. Really, the fact that he was willing to eat up both the contracts of Troy Weaver and also to Monty Williams, who they were paying a bunch of money to. He was willing to eat that up and be like, okay, let's just start over because clearly it wasn't working. And you know what? Props. I always appreciate people who know that, hey, it's not working, and clearly we got to start over and do this better. And they are doing it better. They're 9-2. They look really good. Cade is playing at a MVP level, most definitely. And they're just really fun to watch. So we will certainly be keeping an eye on this team for the remainder of the season. I can't guarantee that we're going to talk about this team every week. But we're at least going to talk about them once or twice a month, at least. Because they're, especially if they're worth talking about, right? And most certainly at this time, they are worth talking about. Okay, it's not like they're not. They're playing really good basketball. Katie's an MVP front runner right now, and it's so great to see this team because 2 years ago, I saw this team at his lowest point, with not winning a game for I think 2 months there under Monty Williams. And I thought to myself, this is the lowest point I've seen an NBA franchise go in a long time. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that now this team, just 2 years later, they're 9-2. Cade is an MVP front runner, and it is really crazy to see how much this team has improved in just two off seasons. Like, the turnaround is what I think. The turnaround is certainly the most impressive part of this team, from the front office, from the coaching. It's just I haven't seen this kind of turnaround in a while for the NBA. So massive credit to everybody involved, to all the players, all the coaching, all the coaches, all the front office people. Just massive props, everybody involved. Anyways, that is the show for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. Please follow the show. Please share it as well with your friends and family. I would really appreciate it. It would mean a lot to me. And yeah, hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you all on Friday.